Okay, everybody, I am happy to have Andy Beach, who most recently was CTO of the Media and Entertainment Group at Microsoft, join me today for the Brain podcast. And Andy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Peter. I was late for our call, in fact, because I've gotten so used to in the last 10 days not being in meetings that I've learned to ignore things like meeting reminders.
Yes, it's all right. But how does it feel? Because it was very surprising to me, for everybody out there. I met Andy probably now, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, probably. And
Yep.
Andy and I have had a number of conversations all along the way. Andy's a voice that I trust, a smart voice, very sees all sides when you're in discussions that are related to the media and entertainment and tech worlds. And so I've gotten a lot of insights out of it and followed what you write, Andy, and how what you speak. And you've been on some of my panels before, which I've appreciated. But so imagine my surprise when I see the announcement on LinkedIn that you decided to try something different. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it felt like it was time, really. I'd been at Microsoft for about 12 years total. I actually started originally as a contractor, in part because I didn't imagine I was ever going to stay there
Yeah.
at the time. And after a couple of years, I really enjoyed the work we were doing. I liked the team that was there, and decided to make the leap and go full time. And 10 years go by, and I'm
Yeah.
still there, but I've seen a lot of changes in the time that I was there. Some great, some not so great. And with everything going on in AI, it was sometimes a struggle to feel like there were ideas I had or things I wanted to do, and all I could do was coach or advise others and not really do any of the work myself. So I think it was time for me to leave and move on, but I think it was a great time to do it because I think there's just part of the thing that was compelling to me is there's so much out there right now that can be done or could be done that now felt like the right time to make the move.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about, Andy, in your role that you had at Microsoft. How
Yeah.
did you see your role as being the CTO of the Media and Entertainment Group? How was the way you approached that role, and what your mandate was and what you had wanted to accomplish?
So I was really there to help own overall technical strategy for Microsoft as it relates to media and entertainment. The product people are very horizontal, and by that I mean they're not thinking about media as an industry vertical. They have to also go support manufacturing and healthcare and retail and government and all of these other industries. So they're just building solutions. And then it's folks like myself who come in and think about it from a very narrow viewpoint of like, oh, I can go use this and this and this, and this would be ideal for remote production, or this is a new way of thinking about how we do distribution or ad insertion or something else. So it's a mix of looking at the products Microsoft has, the partners that we have, the partners that we should have, and going and recruiting and bringing those in, and then working closely with the biggest customers that are out there and trying to hopefully create reference models and blueprints that smaller account teams and customers could then go use to do their own version of it at a smaller scale.
I would imagine in the last year in particular, much of your conversations when you were dealing with Hollywood and the creative community were, okay, Andy, all this AI talk is around us. What does it mean for our business? Help us understand it. All of that. So a lot of understandable fear about how there's the generative AI and AI is going to impact and transform the industry. So tell us about that zeitgeist a little bit that you've been living in the last year and what your thoughts were, how you would approach that with the media companies.
I'd say it was really like the last 2.5 years have probably been just the biggest. When GPT originally got announced, it sort of set everything on fire, and it took all conversations away except for AI related things. And through the years, it's really been sort of first calming people down about what it actually is, so, helping disambiguate and help understand sort of facts from fiction. But then it's been a lot of education, helping understand, where does data actually get used? How is responsible data handled? What are ethical AI models, and what do they look like? Have all been part of the conversations. But then it's been, as the features of AI have grown, because things have changed so significantly in even just the last 2 years around capabilities. Then it's become, okay, well, what can we do, and what can we really do, and versus what is a nice idea, but we don't really have a map into production, or making it so that it's a repeatable thing. It's one thing to prove you can go edit a video using AI technology. There's another to make it something that's a hardened, reliable solution, and make it something that is available for someone to put in and trust with production material.
Yeah. And one of the things I've always appreciated in our conversations is that, as you know, I'm very vocal out there in the world about my feelings that both ethically and legally, it's important to get consent from and compensation to the creative community and media and entertainment companies when their works are used for training of LLMs. And we've had some really good conversations about that, very productive. So understanding things very holistically, but you've been always very respectful about them. And I value that dialogue as everybody's trying to figure out what all of this means. And one thing I want everybody else to know too, which a kind of a reflection about Andy and how he is, was that there was actual Microsoft outreach to the creative community by that event, as an example, that you had in December. And you co-hosted with NVIDIA, and that was something that was outreach to the creative community. That was a sincere attempt, because I was there and I saw it, to have conversations about all these issues and find ways to achieve win-win solutions. And
yeah, that's not those kinds of events are very much a dialogue. I think a lot of people come to them thinking they're going to just get sold a bunch of ideas, but the reality is we're looking for feedback, and we're looking to help understand what are the real problems, what are the things you want to see, and what is the role you want a big company like a Microsoft or even NVIDIA to play in helping define things, because we are very much living in that new world, and there are certain ways that things have been done, but now is the time to make changes and to mix up what the relationship with a big company like a Microsoft looks like in the media space.
Yeah, and ultimately, and I write about this quite a bit in my newsletter, where I write about the need for there to be agreements and licensing agreements and cooperation that way, because as we all know, technology is only going to be speeding up. And as we have this recording, it was just yesterday or just a couple of days ago that DeepSeek was unleashed into the world and has changed the conversations radically. And I'm very curious, because you're, as a technical guy, I'm sure you've had nonstop conversations since this news kind of broke.
Absolutely.
And I want to get your perspective on this.
Go for it.
My theory, and I'm writing about this for my next blog post, is that first of all, the kinds of copyright friction that we see right now, that's holding back adoption, by the way, by media and entertainment companies, studios, to use generative AI tools, because there's a fear of the risk of liability. There is that. That's very real. And there's also very real and understandable fear of creative community blowback. And there's that blowback would be reasonable too, in my view, given all the issues at stake. So already there was this, there's this friction between media companies and tech about that's slowing overall adoption down. And certainly with the new Trump administration, we see who's standing by his side. it's not as if there's going to be any regulation coming down from Washington, D.C. So there needs to be ways to reduce the friction that aren't led by governments. And that's going to be through bilateral deals and deals, or coming up with some kind of payment and compensation systems that rise up. And I think with DeepSeek coming up, there's even more of an urgency now, because to really unleash the Kraken when it comes to AI development from the generative AI companies, because they're going to say national security, things like that. And so the best way to reduce friction as it benefits the creative community is by a willingness to enter into agreements and that reflect the value that the content brings to the overall equation. That's kind of my thesis about it all. But Andy, I'm curious to get your thoughts about how DeepSeek has maybe impacted or transform or changed the conversations you're having with others who are really deeply technically minded.
I think the biggest thing the DeepSeek announcement shows is that there have been lots of similar announcements or things like sort of tech disruptions like this in the past. I think the difference was they didn't take $1 trillion out of the US economy and stock in a single day. And that's indicative of the investors being too close to the R&D that is out there that has to go on to move things forward. I think their involvement and their understanding about it is outstripped by the pace of the innovation that's going. So I think it'll probably, and I hope that it causes a reset in how they think about investments as they move forward in this space. I'm not saying that anything DeepSeek did is wrong or even right at this point. I think, frankly, we don't have enough information about it. And there's so many layers of sort of bias about Chinese companies in US that make it fearful. So I think we are in a period where we need to get more information and understand the team that put the work together. Then, to your point, we absolutely need to understand the source of the data, because data source is going to, as we continue to evolve in this space, understanding the underlying data that helped train it is going to be incredibly important. Being able to understand if your data is involved in that is going to be extremely important. Understanding and creating a mechanism that allows people to be remunerated for that will also be important. We are getting to a stage very rapidly where the content I create as a content creator might be more valuable to a data company that's creating a model than it is as content that I just put out there. Even I do more writing than video, but even text is going to be a thing that is sorely needed, and being able to understand how it at least helped influence or shape a future model is going to be important. And we see companies tackling that problem as well, but we are in such a new space around this that all of it is emerging at the same time. And it's going to look messy for several more years while we work it out. But I do believe that we will continue to get to a place where more and more we have people demanding and pushing to only back content where you understand the sourcing of the material and you have some line of sight to how a creator is able to monetize their IP as part of that overall deal.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I agree. I think that there's going to be product differentiation with content sources that are used for the underlying model, as well as the outputs displays, of course, that come. That there's going to be a certain segment of the population that's willing to pay in a different kind of way for something that is a, for lack of a better word, better quality kind of experience, better quality product. And I'm not analogizing here at all with this, but let's go back to the Napster days.
Yeah,
because I lived it. I ran the company that really invented on-demand streaming on the legitimate side, where we negotiated the first music label deals with the major labels for on-demand streaming. So it was a time where Napster transformed everything. The bad Napster 1.0 came in and just completely obliterated the music business and really drove down in the minds of many consumers the value of music down to zero. Like everything should be free. Okay, so the industry litigated. Ultimately, what it ended up doing is a combination of litigation, litigation is understandable when it comes to these kind of issues. That puts pressure on companies to come up with solutions. So absolutely. But ultimately, it was a better customer experience that resulted, where you would have a large segment of the population that was willing to pay for an experience that's a better experience, and it ultimately, and that would pay the musicians, the artists, those who support them, and the marketing side, et cetera. Now, there's whether it's enough money or not enough money, whether that's a fair allocation, it just happens that way. The economics of the media and entertainment industry in the face of new technology almost happened by accident, the way that they turn out. So I think that things are going to play out similarly, where there's going to be content licensing deals that we are seeing to start bubbling up, and those companies that adhere to what I would call both legally, because the copyright issues, which aren't resolved, but they won't be resolved for years, but nonetheless, they're real issues, so there's risk, but also the ethical issues that come with it. So actually license the content, support the creators. They will have a different kind of product than those who don't. And there's going to be a significant segment of the population that will have a better experience because of it and are willing to pay for it. I think I agree with you. I think that's going to happen. But I want to get back to one other thing, Andy, is that
before you go away from the Napster, I think Napster is a great way of looking at this, and I always try to think in, and I know we're going to talk about it more later, but in some of the writing I'm doing, I try to think about historical tech disruptions and how it impacts a particular part of our business.
Yeah.
And I think AI is just the newest version of that. And I think one of the things Napster did force things like record labels to do was rethink their overall business strategy for how they license content, how they distribute content. And if we would not have a Spotify without a Napster, effectively, because the model wasn't there. Because they were stuck in thinking of it as like an album, in the way that they modeled the business and they monetized the business, and so it just wasn't there. So it's not that they were ignoring digital; it was just that they weren't thinking. They were thinking digital was going to be the way they promote it, but not necessarily the way that they monetize against it directly. And Napster proved that people were going to go around them unless they found a way to meet. And it led to where we are. And I'm not saying AI is exactly like that, but I think it will change the models, and it'll force companies to change, much the way streaming changed the way that businesses think about how they distribute their content. It will also start this change will be how we make the content.
Yeah, agreed. And then fundamental business models change throughout all of those different incarnations, like we saw in the music industry, when you saw the video business with streaming that came on,
and when it happens, it's painful.
It's painful, but it's long term too. Yeah. So like the world we live in streaming, we've seen what's happened, where you've had the major players that have the major streamers have the massive market capitalizations, and the traditional media companies are, they're in great pain. So it wasn't a short-term pain, it's a longer-term pain that continues. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on your perspective on it, but it is what it is. And so there's going to be fundamental transformations in business models with this new technology too. But what you said, Andy, is a good segue into, you are writing a book about this historical perspective. And so this will open up, I think, an interesting conversation we have, which we had a little bit of it beforehand. But your feeling, you were telling me that 10 years from now, we will look back at this moment in time where there is so much trepidation about what AI is going to be doing and how it's going to transform creativity in the overall creative community. And give us your 10-year preview of how we will look back at it.
I am working on, so I actually have two different books I'm sort of thinking about right now in the world of AI. But the one you're talking about and that we talked about is sort of it's looking at sort of what I call the attention economy, which is sort of just that entertainment world, the content in any form that we consume, whether it's a play, music, books, TV, whatever. It has been rife with tech disruptions since the dawn of time, right? And what I what I started thinking about was, are we struggling with AI now because we are in the thick of it? And how did other people deal with other tech disruptions in their era and what came out of it? So I just sort of started researching and thinking about the creation of broadcast television, the creation of cable TV. I lived and breathed the migration into streaming. So that one I felt I sort of knew, but the entire sort of move of going from live music to radio to albums is very much an analog in the music space. And then likewise, there's book publishing and blogs and then the whole advent of social media. All of these things are sort of tech disruptions that radically change fundamentally how we as a people consume content. It also has always, by and large, been about opening up broader and broader markets to basically democratizing the ability to get that content in some way, or democratizing the creation of it at times as well. And I think where we are at now, like I said, AI is kind of doing both, which is somewhat unheard of. We're usually either making it easier to make something or making it easier to find and listen or play along and watch that thing. I think AI in this case is interesting because it's sort of hitting all of those buttons at once. And what I'm trying to do as I do the research and learn more and look at these past events is I'm trying to think, how is it handled in the moment? How is it looked at 5 and 10 years later? What were their reactions? What worked and what didn't? And I believe it'll help me better understand, and I hope it helps other people better understand, how we're feeling about this in the moment. But I hope it also makes us reflect that at the end of the day, we are going to find a path forward with this. I think for better or worse, AI is with us. And I think the people that are trying to actively ignore it or block it all they're doing is pushing back a future that is going to come whether they want it or not. And I think the way that you make the world you want to live in is that you take that technology and you adapt it the way you want it to work for your media workflows, whatever that looks like, rather than letting somebody dictate it. If you ignore it, then you run the risk of someone doing it in a way that you don't agree with or that is unethical, because you're not helping provide your input and your feedback. So I think we have to find a way to contribute, and that tech shouldn't define culture. Culture should define the technology.
So when you look back at all those various journeys that you just kind of took us through, these different evolutions of technology transforming media and entertainment, what I see is as different this time. And I acknowledge that every time you're in the middle of a tech transformation, people think it's different that time. But when you look at just what you were saying, the democratizing the ability to distribute and also to create, the difference here is that generative AI can create. And if it's agentic, as I understand it, then there are ways to kind of set it and forget it. And I'm curious to get your thoughts about that. So there's from a creative standpoint, I can imagine a scenario like on the worst case scenario side where there's just this endless stream of of video that's generated with very little to no human kind of interaction or engagement, and it's flooding the zone. And so, and it may be satisfying because it is, or just because that's what we grow used to, or whatever. But it's unlike other past transformations where still you had human beings who were using new tools to create, using new tools to tell their stories and to distribute. But this is the first technology that comes on board where it can create and it can determine, what tools it needs without or with very minimal human engagement and interaction. And so I see that as being a very different potential long-term scenario.
So I'll push back a little bit. I think ultimately you still have to have a creator, whether they're good or bad. Somebody is helping tell the system what to create. What the AI is allowing is that today it takes at least some level of software training or understanding of production in order to go create that thing, whatever it is. And it's helping you shortcut that ability by making it. I don't think AI takes away a creative in what it's doing. I think it takes away the software that a creative needs to know and understand in order to create that. The closest analog I would apply to me is sort of like the YouTube and the sort of explosion of like the creator economy. Having suddenly we went from, I mean, in a really short amount of time, like if you really think about it, if you go back to sort of broadcast days, there were 4 channels, right? 3 channels really. And then 4 sort of by the time I was paying attention to it. Then we had cable where it sort of was hundreds of channels. Then YouTube came along and it was millions of channels in a way because everybody could be a channel. Everybody could go make their own content. Was that all of that content as good as the Thursday night lineup on NBC? No, definitely not. There was a lot of garbage in there in what was created, but it allowed for an incredibly fragmented and segmented view of watching, and the things that find an audience will survive. And we've seen a rise in particularly newer generations, that is their first choice for the types of content they consume. My daughter only watches something that is like a TV production if she's watching it with us as a family. Rare do those sort of come on. Otherwise, she's watching people who are playing through video games or they're making their own versions of videos for entertainment. So where does that go with AI? AI is allowing people to go create video without necessarily having gone through production training or understanding. Is the content they're going to make interesting? Maybe some of it is, but I bet a lot of it isn't. Those same AI tools in the hands of someone who does have production training and does understand what to do is immediately going to be a better quality than what an untrained person can do with it. So I think as we continue to see this, we are going to see a lot more content. We are going to see better content from the people who, frankly, are better storytellers. And today, often those storytellers are the people that learned the software, learned the tooling, did the training. That may not be true in the future. In the future, it may be more about learning how to tell a good story and then collaborating with a series of agents or a series of AI tools that help you best turn that story into something, whether it's audio, video, text, whatever.
Let me ask you this, if this is even a possibility, because I'm still trying to get my head around agentic AI, agents. And I remember you were actually the first one that I heard the term from, and this was back in December. And now you read about agentic AI everywhere. Everybody's talking about agents, and OpenAI just, launched their first, I forgot what they called it, but it's an agent tool that allows you to do certain things. But is this a possibility? And again, I'm not trying to spread like worst case scenarios, but is this even a possibility that with the sophistication of AI, agentic AI, AGI, artificial general intelligence, whatever you want to call it, that now there's humans who could potentially be virtually eliminated from the equation of creating art or creating creative works of some kind and training themselves on, as an example, let's say the top most successful 50 films of all time, and just looking back at the database of that content and then creating characters on its own and creating a new work of art that is actually surprisingly powerful because it's based on formulas of the past and there's essentially no human involvement whatsoever, and on and on and on and on. Is that possible?
I would argue you're just describing filmmaking right now that humans are doing. I don't think we've had an original idea as a movie in quite a while, just based on some of the things like the Marvel franchise.
You got to come over to our house and see the movies we watch.
We don't need an agent or artificial general intelligence, two very different things, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
In order to go rip off a movie of the past and turn it into a thing. We have plenty of humans that are actively doing that, not a question. You still need a human in any of the AI I have seen that is the creative spark. We are always going to be the orchestrator of the AI. Does that mean that a line producer or an assistant editor or a voiceover artist's job is going to change in the future? It absolutely will change, but it might mean that they are in more control of their voice or their work, and they are creating more things themselves because they are not as reliant on the system that was required to do all of those other steps before. Before, they were a cog in a very large, complex machine to go get things done. We are now saying that there are going to be agents out there that will potentially allow them to take their knowledge and go create their own thing that they have a passion about, or contribute to helping others create their pieces. We will absolutely still have people that are helping create the works of art that we call media that we like to consume. But we will also be using more and more AI, and we have been using AI to make art for over a decade now, let's face it. But we will have more involvement as we move forward. And I think it is important to have these kinds of conversations to think about what do I want the relationship with the AI to be? And I think one that we need to make clear is that there's still a role for humans. If AI is doing anything, it is making the software more accessible to a broader set of storytellers so that they can go get their message out there or they can create the thing they want.
So if you look forward to your 10-year scenario from now,
yep.
Do you believe that AI will be seen as having enhanced the craft of filmmaking and opened up new possibilities, or diminished the craft of filmmaking?
I don't think it's going to be seen. I'm sure we will have these debates multiple times about whether it enhanced or devolved the craft. But again, that's a conversation we've had every time. I mean, it goes as far back as like when video was introduced. That also ruined filmmaking as far as most filmmakers were concerned, and nonlinear editors ruined it for another set. So we will absolutely have those conversations. I think we will come out the other side in 10 years, and there will be very painfully obvious bad art that was created with AI. There will also be absolute masterpieces that people love that have won Oscars or done other things and have impactful messaging that was also created with AI. Both are absolutely possible and both will occur. It is going to be, to me, it's a question of signal versus noise. How much garbage are we going to get to those amazing pieces that we think of as works of art? And I don't know the answer to that right now.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, a couple of things. Regardless of how any of this shakes out over time with the media and entertainment industry and creativity in general, I think that with this volume, the sheer volume, which AI can help us sort through and give us recommendations, nonetheless, I believe that human curation, the trusted voices, the Andys of the world, if I respect what they like, they become increasingly important to just sort through everything. So I think there's the human aspect of the curation will only go up in terms of value. And I also think that, I was just saying this to somebody else, there's a lot of beer out there in the world, that manufactured massive volumes that you see all the commercials on TV during the Super Bowl. But I live in San Diego, which is the home of craft beers. And it's a smaller subset of people, but there's a liking, an inclination to go for the craft beer, to enjoying the craft, to appreciate the craft. And in filmmaking, and I'm using filmmaking as kind of a term for all of the arts, music or whatever. There's always going to be a certain segment of the population that appreciates just the pure craft of the human doing their thing. The musician who has a guitar, which is a tool, but a guitar sitting on a stool in a live experience, and that will never go away. In fact, I think that will be increasingly important. And you're going to have the Christopher Nolans of the world on the filmmaking side, who, yes, they could use visual effects, but they take the challenge on of doing things the old-fashioned way, and which is going to be much more expensive, but nonetheless, it arguably leads to better art, and certain segment appreciates that. And so I feel, I'm throwing out a lot of things, Andy. I'm curious to get your reaction, but I'm curious to get your reaction about this. I also believe that true originality only comes from the human experience. Truly original, and by definition, unless you're a human being, can't really appreciate the human experience. And certainly what I say right now is completely unpredictable. It could be erroneous. It could be whatever. And I'm not the engineer, you are, but an AI can speak much more eloquently than I am, but it won't be Peter Csathy. It won't be the exact same. And so there's something about the human element, and Rick Rubin wrote about this in his great book about creativity. It's the messiness, it's the errors, it's the human experience that truly creates something that has never been created before. So that's a lot, Andy, but I'm curious to get your thoughts about it all.
So if we go back to your commentary around there being a market for sort of we'll call it the completely non-AI, the Nolan return to the craft. There will absolutely be a niche for that in the future amongst AI. There will be, the marketing we will see is that completely touched by no AI and completely done lovingly by humans will be a thing. And it will be considered sort of probably more of a high art. Like, in order to do that, it would be the equivalent of going to a play instead of streaming something on TV. It'll probably become more of a refined thing if you're doing it, and possibly even more of a premium as part of it. But it will still continue to exist. I don't think there's a reason that it goes away just because we have the ability to use AI. I think AI, again, just opens up to a much broader range of people who never thought they had the ability to go be creative. They now have something that will help them be creative.
Yeah. Okay. And so Andy,
that's how I see it.
Yeah. So what's next for you? You're writing your books.
I'm writing a lot. I'm walking my dog. I'm spending time with my family. And I just started a Substack, which is a thing that multiple people have been trying to get me to do for years. And so for now, I'm just a man about town, enjoying myself, having conversations like this with a lot of people, and figuring out what exactly I do next. I'm sure there's another job in my future that I can look at my bank account and promise you I will have a job in the future, no question. But I hope that it's one on my terms and doing something that I'm passionate about, which, it's this stuff and it's these conversations that I enjoy having that I think are impactful. So if there's ways that I can go do that, that's what I'm going to be doing. But for now, it's Substack, dog walks, hang out with the family.
Well, it sounds wonderful, and it sounds like it's a well-earned kind of respite from everything. Curious, when you mentioned like writing your Substack,
Yeah.
will AI come into play in terms of being a tool for you while you're as part of that?
Absolutely. I look, I'm unabashed that I use AI when I do my work. AI has helped replace some of the, it's almost a research assistant for me as I'm looking for things. Sure, I have Google, but being able to send it on a query to look for sort of specific targeted items, I get better quality results sometimes than just purely a Google search. And
How about,
we
but
can
how about the writing itself though? Your writing itself.
absolutely. So I have I have written a ton in my life. I've written white papers, I've written books, I've written a lot of articles. I've absolutely been able to feed it all of that material. I have basically a private instance that I fine-tuned that says this is my style of writing. And the first thing I did was I asked the large language model to sort of define what my writing style looked like. And it gave me back a results. And I said, great, this is my defined style. Anytime that I'm giving you notes or giving you rough drafts, I want you to go fix the punctuation. I want you to fix my grammar. I want you to follow these styles, but I also want to make sure it's in my voice. And you now have a version of my voice so that I don't have to sit. And I will tell you, it's made me a faster writer because I am the kind of person who will write a rough draft and then I will rewrite 75 times in 3 weeks because I still think there's a point I need to make. And there's one more thing I want to add. And this sort of allows me to do that and say, oh, I forgot about this. I want to go add this in, and it needs to be in these 4 paragraphs. And I can do that because I basically have a writing assistant who's helping me pull all the pieces together. The end result is still mine. The thing that got created, trust me, nobody's going to put their name against it but me because it may or may not be good. But it's my input and it's my conversation to be had. But I've absolutely become used to thinking of AI as a part of my workflow. There's absolutely times that I get completely old school. I will sit down with pen and paper and do initial notes and writing. And then I actually like to still physically mark up a document as well. But all of that goes back in, and the final is invariably sort of reviewed and critiqued. And we brushed upon agents, but I have an editor agent. I have a version of the model, and the persona is nothing but basically a book critic. And I want them to give me critical feedback. Don't praise me. Tell me what's wrong with it. Tell me what is the audience not going to connect with, and give me suggestions on how to fix it. And I take that feedback into mind as I'm thinking about the writing so that I have other perspectives before I've even shared it with an audience. And then the next step is to go put it in front of people like you, my trusted network, my friends, my family, and force them to read all of my stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I ask because I write so much, and for the good or for the bad, I write every word, and I don't use anything. In research, sometimes I use AI occasionally, for sure, because I find AI search to be very, very helpful. But
Sure.
Everything I write is like every little decision, every micro decision, every little edit, everything, every typo, that's all me. I don't use AI for anything. And again, that I'm not saying that as a badge of honor or not bad. It's just something I've chosen to do because I think my voice is a certain thing. And I know I have enough stuff out there where I could train
Sure.
an AI to be able to do the kinds of things that you mentioned. But that's just where I stand on it right now for me, my personal choice on it. But I totally get it. But Andy, listen, I love these conversations. I really value your thoughts and your mind. I'm happy and excited for you for your next journey. I think it's always good for people to shake up their lives because, life, if nothing else, is about experiences and in enjoying or sometimes not enjoying, but just experiencing life in different kinds of ways. So let's keep the conversations going. Andy Beach, everybody. And no longer with Microsoft. Who knows where he's going to be? But
if you want to find me, the only place you can find me and give me an opinion of what I'm doing or read what I'm doing is my Substack, which is simple. It's abeach.substack.com.
Very good. Andy, good to see you.
Good to see you, Peter. Thanks again.